The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before Captain Jake Morrison like a vast arena built for giants. Hundreds of alien beings sat in curved rows that rose high into the darkness above, their strange forms barely visible in the dim blue light that filled the space. Some had multiple eyes that glowed with inner fire. Others possessed tentacles that writhed as they whispered to their neighbors, and a few looked almost human except for their silver skin or extra arms. Jake stood alone in the center of the chamber, his hands bound behind his back with energy shackles that hummed with power. His dark blue uniform bore the insignia of Earth's Space Navy, but here among these alien creatures it felt like wearing a target. The weight of representing all humanity pressed down on his shoulders like a mountain dot high above him on a floating platform. The Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Council looked down with eyes like black holes. The Chancellor belonged to a race called the Eternal Ones, being so old that they claimed to remember when the first stars were born. His voice echoed through the chamber without him opening his mouth, speaking directly into the minds of everyone present. "We are here to decide the fate of the species known as humans," the Chancellor announced, his mental voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "They stand accused of violating the sacred protocols of galactic harmony that have kept peace in our galaxy for 10,000 years. Ambassador Lisa Carter sat in the human delegation area, her hands gripped tightly in her lap as she watched Jake stand trial for all their people. She had spent years building relationships with alien diplomats, learning their customs and languages, trying to prove that humans deserved a place in galactic society. Now all of that work seemed to crumble around her like sand. The first to speak against humanity was High Counselor Vex Thara of the Zephyrian Empire. She stood nearly 9 feet tall with skin that changed colors like an oil slick and 6 arms that moved with liquid grace. When she spoke, her voice carried the sound of wind through crystal caves. "The humans are a plague upon civilized space," Vex Thara declared, her words causing many of the other delegates to nod in agreement. "They expand without permission, take what they want without asking, and show no respect for the ancient ways that govern our galaxy. In the mere 50 years since first contact, they have established colonies in 12 systems without council approval." Jake wanted to defend his species, to explain that humans were simply following the same drive that had taken them from caves to the stars, but the energy shackles prevented him from speaking. He could only stand and listen as his people were. Condemned, the insectoid representative of the Cathara hive clicked and buzzed as she presented her evidence. Through a translation device, her words came out in a mechanical voice that somehow managed to convey anger and disgust. "Human mining operations have destroyed 3 sacred breeding grounds of the crystal whales of Andrus," the Cathara delegate stated. "They show no understanding of the delicate balance that must exist between civilization and nature. Their machines tear apart entire moons in search of rare metals, leaving nothing but dead rock behind." More accusations followed, each one painting humanity as dangerous barbarians who threatened the peace and stability of the galaxy. The Vorthan Supremacy complained about human traders who refused to follow established commerce protocols. The Ethereal Collective spoke of human explorers who entered forbidden zones without permission. The Crystalline Assembly accused humans of disrupting ancient meditation sites with their noisy spacecraft. Ambassador Carter was finally allowed to speak in humanity's defense. She stood slowly, her legs shaking slightly as she faced the assembled representatives of dozens of alien civilizations. Her voice was steady despite her fear, carrying the determination that had made her Earth's most skilled diplomat. "Honored delegates," she began, using the formal address she had practiced countless times. "Humanity asks for understanding rather than judgment. We are a young species, still learning the ways of galactic civilization. Our actions come not from malice but from ignorance of customs we are only beginning to understand." She gestured toward Jake, who stood silent in his bonds. Captain Morrison and his crew were following human law when they established that mining outpost. They had no knowledge that the system was considered sacred by other species. When they were informed, they immediately ceased operations and withdrew. But her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The alien delegates whispered among themselves in dozens of different languages, creating a sound like a storm of angry insects. Many of them had already made up their minds before the trial began. The final speaker was Chancellor Mordain of the Hegemony, a tall being with metallic skin and eyes like burning coals. He had been one of the few aliens to initially support humanity's inclusion in the Council, but now his expression showed only disappointment and anger. "I believed humans could learn to follow our ways," Mordain said, his voice carrying across the chamber like a judgment from the gods. "I argued for patience when they first arrived in our space with their crude ships and primitive weapons. But they have shown repeatedly that they cannot control their aggressive nature. They are too dangerous to remain among civilized species." The Supreme Chancellor raised one ancient hand for silence. The chamber fell quiet except for the low hum of the energy barriers that surrounded Jake's platform. When the Chancellor spoke again, his mental voice carried the finality of a death sentence. "The Galactic Council has reached its decision," he announced. "The species known as humans is hereby banished from all territories under Council protection. They will have one full cycle of their home star to evacuate all colonies and outposts within civilized space. Any human presence remaining after this deadline will be considered an act of war and dealt with accordingly." Jake felt his knees nearly give out as the words hit him like physical blows. Banishment meant that Earth and all human colonies would be forced to abandon everything they had built and flee to the dangerous frontier regions beyond the galaxy's inhabited zones. Millions of people would become refugees overnight, cast out into the darkness of unexplored space. Admiral Ryan Burke received the news aboard the UES Defender, humanity's most advanced warship, as it orbited Earth in a protective formation with the rest of the human fleet. The ship's bridge fell silent as the communication from the trial reached them. Officers who had served together for years stared at each other in shock and disbelief. "Sir, what are our orders?" asked Commander Pete Davis, the ship's tactical officer. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he spoke. Admiral Burke looked out at the blue and green world that had given birth to their species. "Earth looks so peaceful from orbit, its cities sparkling like jewels in the sunlight. Soon it would be empty, abandoned by its children, who were being driven into exile by species they had hoped to call friends." "Signal all ships," Burke said. "Quietly, prepare for full evacuation protocols. We have work to do." President Helen Warren addressed the world that evening from the White House, her face grave as she explained the Council's decision to the billions of people who called Earth home. Behind her, through the window, the lights of Washington glowed against the night sky like a constellation brought down to Earth. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the planet through television and radio and internet streams, "we face the greatest challenge in our species' history. We are not wanted in the civilized galaxy, but we will not let that defeat us. We will take our courage, our determination, and our dreams with us to the stars. Humanity will survive, and we will prove that we deserve better than exile." The massive evacuation began immediately. Transport ships that had carried colonists to distant worlds now returned to Earth to carry them away again. Entire cities were packed into cargo holds, their populations becoming wanderers in search of new homes among the hostile frontier. Worlds. As the last transport ship lifted off from Earth's surface, Jake Morrison stood at an observation deck and watched his homeworld shrink to a point of light. The energy shackles were gone now, but he still felt bound by the weight of responsibility for his species' fate. Somewhere in the darkness ahead lay humanity's future, and it would be built not with the help of alien friends, but in spite of alien enemies. 5 years had passed since the Great Exile began, and humanity now lived scattered across the dangerous frontier worlds at the edge of known space. The comfortable colonies they had built in civilized territory were nothing but memories now, replaced by harsh settlements on planets where the very air could kill and the ground held dangers that no Council species had ever faced. Colony Commander Pete Davis stood on the observation deck of Mining Station 7, watching his people work the surface of Kepler 442 see through the reinforced windows that protected him from the planet's toxic atmosphere. The miners below moved like ants across the red wasteland, their environmental suits gleaming in the light of the system's angry orange star. They were digging for rare minerals that existed nowhere in Council space, elements so exotic that most alien scientists had never heard of them. "Another good haul today, Commander," reported Chief Engineer Tony Ross as he entered the observation room. His face was streaked with sweat and dust from checking the mining equipment personally, something no Council overseer would ever do. "The quantum resonance crystals we found yesterday are testing at 97% purity. That's better than anything the Galactic Council ever produced." Davis nodded but kept watching his people work. Every day brought new challenges that would have broken the spirits of most alien species. The planet's gravity was 30%. Stronger than Earth normal, the atmosphere would dissolve human lungs in minutes, and the native creatures were aggressive beyond anything they had encountered before. Yet his miners kept working, kept pushing deeper into the hostile ground, because that was what humans did when faced with impossible odds. "Any word from the other colonies?" Davis asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. Communication between the scattered human settlements was difficult and dangerous, requiring ships to brave pirate-infested space routes that the Council had abandoned as too costly to patrol. Colony ship New Boston reported another pirate attack last week. Ross said grimly. "They fought them off but lost 2 cargo transports in the process." The Austin settlement on Proxima 7 is dealing with some kind of plague that affects the wheat crops, and the folks on New Denver are still trying to figure out how to mine underwater on that ocean world they found. Every human settlement faced similar struggles. The frontier worlds were harsh and unforgiving places where a single mistake could doom thousands of people. Yet somehow, humanity was not just surviving but slowly learning to thrive in conditions that would have killed most. Council species within days. Dr. Susan Blake worked in her laboratory deep inside the mining station, studying tissue samples from human colonists who had been living on various frontier worlds for the past 5 years. Her research had revealed something that amazed even her scientific mind. Humans were adapting to extreme conditions at a rate that should have been impossible according to everything known about biology and evolution. The genetic changes are subtle but consistent across all colonies, she explained to her assistant, Dr. Maria Santos, as they examined the latest batch of samples under powerful microscopes. Humans living on high-gravity worlds are showing increased bone density and muscle development. Those on low-oxygen planets have enlarged lung capacity and more efficient blood cells. It's as if our species has some kind of built-in ability to adapt to hostile environments that other aliens simply don't possess. Dr. Santos looked up from her microscope with wonder in her eyes. "The psychological changes are even more remarkable," she added. "Humans who should be suffering from severe depression and anxiety in these isolated conditions are instead showing increased cooperation and creativity. We're not just surviving out here, we're becoming something stronger than we were before." Meanwhile, in the hidden shipyards of the asteroid belt near the Centauri Nebula, Fleet Admiral Kate Miller was building something that no Council species had ever seen. The ships taking shape in the zero-gravity construction bays looked nothing like the standardized vessels used by the Galactic Council. Instead, they were hybrid creations that combined human engineering with technology salvaged from derelict alien ships found drifting in the frontier regions. "The new drive system is ready for testing, Admiral," reported Chief Designer Alex Green as he floated beside her in the weightless environment of the main construction bay. Before them hung the prototype vessel that would change everything for humanity. It was sleek and deadly, built for speed and stealth rather than the imposing bulk favored by Council warships. "What makes it different from their ships?" Miller asked, though she had helped design many of the innovations herself. She wanted to hear it explained in simple terms that any human could understand. "Council ships are built like fortresses," Green explained, pointing to various sections of their creation. "Big, heavily armored, designed to fight the same kind." of battles they've been fighting for thousands of years. Our ship is built like a wolf pack. Fast, smart, able to work together with others of its kind in ways that their rigid battle formations can't match. The breakthrough had come from studying wreckage left behind by some ancient war in the frontier regions. The technology was older than the Galactic Council itself, created by a species that had vanished from the galaxy long before humans had learned to make fire. But where Council archaeologists had seen only historical curiosities, human engineers had seen possibilities back in Council space. The alien civilizations that had banished humanity were beginning to face problems of their own. The Draconian Empire and the Ethereal Collective had started what they called trade disputes, but everyone knew were really small wars fought over the territories that humans had been forced to abandon. Without humanity as a common enemy to unite them, the Council members were starting to remember why they had fought each other for thousands of years before. Chancellor Mordain of the Hegemony received daily reports about increasing tensions throughout Council space. The Zephyrians were demanding exclusive rights to the former human colonies in the Vega sector, while the Vorthan supremacy claimed that their ancient treaties gave them priority. Smaller species found themselves caught in the middle, forced to choose sides or risk being crushed by their more powerful neighbors. Perhaps banishing the humans was premature, suggested his aide, a nervous creature whose species had barely achieved spaceflight when the Council first accepted them. They were aggressive, yes, but they also served as a buffer between the major powers. Without them, everyone is looking for new conflicts. Mordain dismissed the suggestion with a wave of his metallic hand. Humans were too dangerous to remain among civilized species, he said, though his voice lacked the certainty it had carried 5 years ago. Whatever problems we face now, we can solve them without those barbarians interfering. The first real test of humanity's new capabilities came when a massive pirate fleet attacked the refugee convoy near the outer edge of the Centauri system. The pirates had grown bold in the years since the human exile, raiding settlements and shipping with little fear of retaliation from the distant Council fleets. They expected to find easy prey in the form of desperate human refugees fleeing deeper into the frontier. Captain Amy Bell commanded the escort vessel Defiance, one of the new hybrid ships built in the secret shipyards. Her crew was smaller than what a Council ship would carry, but each member was cross-trained in multiple specialties and ready to fight with the kind of desperate courage that only comes from having nowhere to run. Pirate fleet approaching fast, reported Lieutenant Steve Price from the tactical station. 47 ships of various classes, all armed and broadcasting demands for surrender. They want us to heave to and prepare for boarding. Captain Bell smiled grimly as she looked at the enemy formation on the main display. The pirates were arranged in the standard attack pattern used throughout the galaxy, a formation that had worked for thousands of years against predictable Council tactics. But humans didn't fight like the Council. Signal all ships in the convoy, she ordered. Execute Maneuver 7. What happened next would become legend among human spacers. The refugee ships scattered in what appeared to be panic, drawing the pirates into pursuit. But as the enemy fleet spread out to chase multiple targets, the hidden escort ships emerged from the convoy's sensor shadows and struck with coordinated precision that took the pirates completely by surprise. The battle was over in less than 30 minutes. When the smoke cleared, the pirate fleet had been completely destroyed with only minimal human losses. The survivors who managed to escape in damaged ships carried word of what they had witnessed back to every corner of the frontier. Humanity was no longer running or hiding. They were fighting back and winning. As news of the victory spread through the human colonies, something new began to stir in the hearts of the exiled species. They had been cast out by aliens who thought them too dangerous for civilized space. Perhaps it was time to prove those aliens right. 20 years had passed since humanity's banishment from civilized space, and the scattered refugee colonies had transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. General Chris Wade stood on the bridge of the battleship Vengeance, watching through the viewport as his fleet prepared to assault the Drakmor system. The pirates who had terrorized human settlements for decades were about to learn that their victims had become predators. "All ships report ready for attack," announced Commander Ben Clark from the tactical station. The bridge crew moved with the smooth efficiency that came from years of fighting in the lawless frontier regions. Every officer had earned their position through merit and courage rather than political connections or ancient bloodlines like the Council species used. General Wade nodded as he studied the enemy positions displayed on the holographic battle map. The pirate stronghold was built inside a massive asteroid, its surface bristling with weapons and shield generators that would have stopped any Council fleet. But humans no longer fought like the Council. "Begin the attack," Wade ordered quietly. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed chaotic to outside observers, but followed a complex dance of coordination that no alien species had ever mastered. Instead of the rigid battle lines favored by Council fleets, the human vessels flowed like water around obstacles, each ship supporting the others while maintaining perfect tactical flexibility, the new phase drive technology, perfected by engineer Maria Santos in the deep laboratories of the frontier colonies, allowed human ships to slip between dimensions for brief moments. One second they would be firing at the asteroid fortress, the next they would vanish completely, only to reappear behind the enemy defenses where no attack was expected. The battle lasted only 2 hours. When it ended, the pirate stronghold was nothing but glowing debris drifting through space, and the survivors were broadcasting surrender messages on all frequencies. More importantly, word of the human victory would spread throughout the frontier, letting everyone know that the exiled species had become something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. On the distant world of New Terra, President Allen Foster received the news of the victory while reviewing reports from dozens of human colonies scattered across the Outer Rim. Each settlement told the same story of growth, adaptation, and success in environments that would have killed most alien species. Humanity was not just surviving in exile, they were thriving in ways that seemed impossible. The Kepler mining colonies have increased production by 40% this year, reported his aide, Dr. Lover King, as she handed him the latest statistics. The underwater cities on Aquarius Prime have discovered new species of fish that could feed millions, and the research stations in the Void Nebula have made breakthroughs in energy generation that surpass anything the Council has achieved. Foster smiled as he read through the reports. Every human colony had become a center of innovation and discovery, pushed by necessity to solve problems that the comfortable Council species had never needed to face. The harsh frontier worlds had forged humanity into something stronger, smarter, and more adaptable than they had ever been while living under alien protection. "It's time," Foster said finally. "Send word to all colony leaders and military commanders. We're forming the Terran Federation." The announcement went out across human space on quantum communication channels that the Council couldn't intercept or decode. Within weeks, representatives from every human settlement began arriving at New Terra for the founding convention of humanity's first unified government since the exile began. Unlike the bureaucratic nightmare of the Galactic Council, the Terran Federation was designed for efficiency and action. Military leaders who had proven themselves in combat worked alongside civilian administrators who had built thriving colonies from nothing. Every decision was made by people who understood the realities of survival in hostile space rather than politicians who had never left their comfortable HOMEWO all DS. The Federation's first major test came when the Vorthan Supremacy, one of the alien species that had voted for humanity's banishment, decided to claim the quantum crystal mines in the Perseus sector. The Vorthans had watched human expansion with growing alarm and concluded that the exiled species needed to be reminded of their place in the galaxy. Admiral Kate Miller, now commanding the Federation's entire military fleet, received the Vorthan ultimatum while orbiting the crystal mining world of Epsilon Eridani. The alien message was typically arrogant, demanding that humans abandon their colonies and submit to Vorthan authority or face the consequences of defying a Council ally. "What are your orders, Admiral?" asked Captain Jake Morrison, the same man who had stood trial before the Galactic Council 20 years earlier. He now commanded one of the Federation's most advanced warships, built with technology that made Council vessels look like ancient relics. Miller looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Vorthan fleet. 60 ships of the line, all armed with the standardized weapons and defenses that the Council had been using for thousands of years. They were probably expecting to face desperate human refugees using cobbled-together equipment and improvised tactics. "Show them what we've learned in 20 years of exile," Miller said calmly. The Battle of Epsilon Eridani became the first official engagement between the Terran Federation and a Council ally, and it served as a brutal demonstration of how far humanity had evolved since their banishment. The Vorthan fleet approached in the traditional formation that had served them well for centuries, expecting to overwhelm the smaller human force through superior numbers and firepower. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Human ships used their phase drive technology to appear and disappear seemingly at random, striking from impossible angles before vanishing again. Their weapons, hybrid creations that combine multiple alien technologies with human innovation, cut through Vorthan shields like they were made of paper, but the most shocking thing was how the human ships worked together. Every vessel moved in perfect coordination with every other, creating attack patterns that seemed to anticipate the enemy's every move. It was as if the entire human fleet shared a single mind, something that the individualistic Council species found impossible to understand or counter. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Vorthan expedition. Only a single damaged ship escaped to carry word back to Council space, its crew traumatized by witnessing the annihilation of what they had believed was an invincible fleet. News of the human victory sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Council species that had dismissed humanity as primitive refugees suddenly began demanding information about what the exiled species had become. Military analysts studied the few sensor recordings of the battle and came to conclusions that terrified their governments. Dr. Susan Blake, now the Federation's chief xenobiologist, was studying ancient ruins discovered on a dead world near the Galactic Rim when the victory reports reached her research station. The ruins belonged to a species that had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind technology that was still beyond the understanding of most galactic civilizations. The artifacts we found suggest this ancient race had abilities that the current Council species can't even imagine, she explained to her research team as they carefully excavated a massive structure buried beneath centuries of dust. They could manipulate space and time, travel between dimensions, and control energy on a scale that makes our most advanced technology look primitive. But what excited Blake most was not the technology itself, but what it suggested about the nature of intelligence and evolution. The ancient race had not been content to simply use the same methods for thousands of years like the Council species. They had constantly pushed the boundaries of what was possible, always seeking new ways to grow and adapt. This is why humanity succeeded where others failed, she told her team. We don't just accept things as they are. We always ask what could be better, what could be different, what could be improved. The Council species became comfortable with their ancient ways and stopped growing. We never stopped growing. As human expansion continued, something unexpected began to happen. The native species of the Outer Rim, creatures that the Council had dismissed as primitive savages, started seeking alliance with the Federation rather than fleeing from human contact. The reptilian Skarn, who had been hunted by Council slave traders for centuries, found that humans treated them as equals rather than inferiors. Chief Ambassador Lisa Carter, now elderly but still sharp, negotiated the first formal alliance between humanity and an alien species since the exile began. The ceremony took place on the Skarn homeworld, with human and alien representatives standing together under the light of binary stars. We offer partnership, not domination, Carter said in her speech to the assembled Skarn leaders. We have learned that strength comes not from ruling others but from standing together against those who would rule us all. The Skarn chieftain, an ancient creature whose scales bore the scars of countless battles against Council raiders, replied in Broken but determined human language. Humans fight like Skarn fight. No surrender, no retreat, no fear. 50 years had passed since the Galactic Council banished humanity from civilized space, and Emperor Nathan Cross stood before the assembled leaders of the Terran Federation with fire in his eyes. The massive council chamber on New Terra hummed, with quiet energy as representatives from hundreds of human worlds and dozens of allied alien species waited for his words. The time for hiding in the frontier regions was over. For half a century, we have built our strength in the darkness beyond their borders, Cross declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We have forged alliances with species they called primitive, mastered technologies they could never imagine, and created a civilization that surpasses anything the galaxy has ever seen. Now it is time to reclaim what was stolen from us. The Emperor had been elected by the Federation Senate not through birthright or political maneuvering, but because he had led more successful military campaigns than any other human commander. His scarred hands and weathered face told the story of decades spent fighting pirates, hostile aliens, and the harsh realities of frontier life. When he spoke of war, everyone listened. Admiral Gary Stone nodded from his position at the military briefing table. As commander of the Federation's Stealth Operations Division, he had been preparing for this moment for years. His ships had already begun the first phase of humanity's return to civilized space, though the Council didn't know it yet. The reconnaissance missions are complete, Stone reported, activating a holographic display that showed the current state of Council territory. Their defenses are weaker than we expected. 50 years of peace have made them soft and overconfident. Most of their patrol fleets are using the same ship designs they had when we were exiled. Captain Amy Bell stood beside Stone, her uniform bearing the insignia of the Federation's elite Phantom Squadron. She had personally led dozens of raids deep into Council space, gathering intelligence and testing enemy responses without revealing the true extent of human capabilities. Their shipping lanes are completely predictable, Bell added, pointing to various trade routes marked on the display. They follow the same patterns they've used for thousands of years, with minimal escort protection. We've been intercepting their cargo vessels for months, and they still think it's ordinary piracy. The raids had been carefully planned to look like random criminal activity rather than organized military operations. Human stealth ships would strike fast and hard against Council merchant vessels, capturing their cargo and studying their technology, before vanishing back into the empty spaces between stars. The Council authorities dismissed these attacks as the work of increasingly bold frontier pirates, but the captured ships told a different story to human engineers and scientists. Council technology had barely advanced in the 5 decades since the exile, while humanity had made revolutionary breakthroughs that gave them advantages the aliens couldn't comprehend. The phased drive alone made human ships nearly impossible to track or intercept, allowing them to appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Dr. Maria Santos, now the Federation's chief technology officer, had spent years analyzing captured Council equipment and finding weaknesses that could be exploited. Her research teams had discovered that the standardized weapons and shields used throughout Council space all shared the same fundamental design flaws, vulnerabilities that humanity could target with devastating effectiveness. Their plasma cannons operate on a frequency that our new defensive systems can absorb and redirect, Santos explained to the assembled military commanders. Their shield generators have a refresh cycle that creates brief windows of vulnerability every 7 seconds. Most importantly, their computer systems still use the same security protocols they did 50 years ago. The information gathering phase was complete, but Emperor Cross wanted the galaxy to understand exactly what humanity had become before the real war began. He ordered Admiral Stone to conduct a demonstration that would send shockwaves throughout Council space and announce that the exiled species had returned. The target chosen for this demonstration was a Council patrol fleet in the contested Vega system, the same region where humans had once maintained their largest colonies before the banishment. 24 Council warships from 3 different species patrolled the system in a routine security sweep, confident in their superiority and completely unaware of the death approaching them. Admiral Stone's task force materialized from phase. Drive transit at the edge of the Vega system like ghosts becoming solid. 12 human warships appeared where empty space had existed moments before, their sleek hulls reflecting the distant starlight like predatory shadows. The Council Patrol fleet detected them immediately but couldn't understand what they were seeing. Unknown vessels, you are in violation of Council territorial sovereignty. Broadcast the Zephyrian fleet commander, her translated voice carrying the arrogance typical of her species. Identify yourselves immediately and prepare to be escorted from this system. Stone smiled grimly as he opened a communication channel that would broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in the system and every monitoring station in Council space would hear his words clearly. "This is Admiral Gary Stone of the Terran Federation Navy," he announced, his voice calm and deadly. "We are the humans you banished 50 years ago. We have returned to reclaim what is ours." The Zephyrian commander's shocked silence lasted only a few seconds before training took over. "All ships, Battle Formation Alpha, destroy the human vessels immediately." What followed was not a battle, but a systematic demonstration of technological superiority. The Council ships moved in their traditional attack patterns, firing weapons that had been considered state-of-the-art for centuries. But their plasma beams and missile barrages struck nothing but empty space as the human ships phased in and out of normal reality, appearing behind the enemy formation to deliver devastating counterattacks. The new human weapons, hybrid creations, that combined technologies from a dozen different extinct civilizations, tore through Council shields like they were made of paper. Energy beams that could bend space itself carved alien warships into glowing fragments, while quantum torpedoes ignored conventional defenses entirely to detonate inside enemy hulls. The most terrifying aspect of the engagement was how the human ships moved together. Each vessel seemed to know exactly where every other ship would be at any given moment, creating attack patterns that surrounded and overwhelmed the enemy from multiple directions simultaneously. It was coordination on a level that the individualistic Council species found impossible to achieve. Within 30 minutes, 23 Council warships had been reduced to wreckage drifting through space. The sole survivor, a heavily damaged Vorthan cruiser, broadcast a desperate surrender message on all frequencies before attempting to flee the system. Admiral Stone allowed it to escape, knowing that its crew would carry word of humanity's return to every corner of the galaxy. The news of the Vega system massacre spread through Council space like wildfire. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians suddenly realized that the exiled race had become something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Intelligence services scrambled to gather information about human capabilities, while military commanders demanded emergency funding to upgrade their obsolete fleets. Chancellor Mordain of the Hegemony convened an emergency session of the Galactic Council within days of receiving the battle reports. The same chamber where humanity had been condemned 50 years earlier, now filled with alien delegates struggling to understand how their former victims had become their greatest threat. The humans possessed technology that defies our understanding of physics, reported the Ethereal Collective's military advisor. A being of pure energy that flickered with obvious distress. Their ships can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their weapons ignore our strongest defenses, and their coordination suggests some form of collective consciousness that we cannot comprehend. High Admiral Rachel Price of the Federations. Diplomatic corps chose that moment to announce humanity's terms to the galaxy. Her message was broadcast simultaneously to every major council world, carried by quantum communication systems that the aliens couldn't block or trace. To the species of the Galactic Council, Price's voice echoed through the chamber where humanity had once been judged. You cast us out 50 years ago because you feared our strength. That fear was justified. We offer each of your civilizations a simple choice: submit to the authority of the Terran Federation and enjoy the protection and prosperity we provide to our allies, or continue to oppose us and face the consequences of your decision. The message included detailed intelligence reports showing the true extent of Federation territory and military capabilities. Council analysts who studied the data realized with growing horror that humanity now controlled more star systems than any three council members combined, commanded technology decades ahead of galactic standards, and had forged alliances with species that the council had oppressed for millennia. Several minor species immediately announced their intention to leave the council and join the Federation. The insectoid terminus swarm, long exploited by larger species for their manufacturing capabilities. The final battle for the galaxy began at Nexus Prime, the ancient world where the Galactic Council had ruled for 10,000 years. Emperor Nathan Cross stood on the bridge of the flagship Humanity's Will as the largest fleet in human history. Emerged from phase drive around the Council's home system. Behind him spread an armada of 10,000 ships, carrying crews from dozens of species united under the Federation banner. Chancellor Mordain had assembled every vessel the Council could muster for this last desperate stand. Nearly 15,000 ships from 30 different alien civilizations filled the space around Nexus Prime like a metal storm, their weapons trained on the approaching human fleet. It was the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history, representing the combined might of species that had ruled the stars for millennia. "All ships report ready for battle," announced Admiral Sarah Williams from her position at the tactical station. The elite Phantom Squadron under her command had grown from a small stealth unit into the Federation's most feared combat force. Pilots whose skills had been forged in 50 years of frontier warfare against impossible odds. Emperor Cross studied the enemy formation displayed on the massive holographic projector that dominated the bridge. The Council fleet was arranged in the traditional defensive pattern that had protected their homeworld for thousands of years, layer upon layer of ships creating an impenetrable barrier around the planet below. It was a formation designed to stop any conventional attack, but humans had never been conventional. "Begin the assault," Cross ordered quietly, his voice carrying to every ship in the Federation fleet through quantum communication channels that the Council couldn't intercept or jam. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when the old galaxy died and a new one was born. The human ships didn't charge forward in the massed attack that the Council commanders expected. Instead, they scattered across multiple dimensions, using advanced phase drive technology to appear throughout the enemy formation simultaneously. Fleet Admiral Joe Murphy led the Stellar Engineering Corps in their first combat deployment, massive ships carrying weapons that could reshape reality itself. These vessels had been built using technology recovered from the ancient ruins scattered throughout the frontier regions, incorporating scientific principles that the current galactic civilizations couldn't understand. Gravitational anchors deployed. Murphy reported as his ships began their work. Reality stabilizers are active. The enemy fleet is locked in normal space. The Council ships suddenly found themselves unable to maneuver as gravity wells appeared around them without warning. Their drives failed as space itself became solid around their hulls, trapping them in formations that had seemed impregnable moments before but were now death traps, human warships phased into existence inside the enemy formation. Their weapons, targeting specific weak points that Federation intelligence had identified through years of captured technology analysis. Quantum torpedoes materialized inside alien ships without passing through their shields, while reality warping energy beams carved through hulls made of materials that had been considered indestructible. But the most devastating aspect of the human attack was not their weapons or technology, but their coordination. Every ship moved in perfect harmony with every other, creating attack patterns that seemed to anticipate the enemy's responses before they were made. It was as if the entire Federation fleet shared a single consciousness, something that no Council species had ever achieved. The battle raged for 6 hours as Council forces threw everything they had at the human invaders. Ancient weapons that had been stored in emergency vaults for thousands of years were brought online. Desperate alien commanders authorized the use of planet-killer devices that had been banned since the last Great Galactic War. None of it mattered. Admiral Williams led her Phantom Squadron through the heart of the enemy formation. Her ships dancing between enemy fire like ghosts made solid. Their mission was to penetrate Nexus Prime's planetary defenses and capture the Council Chamber itself, bringing an end to 10,000 years of alien rule. "Planetary shields are down," Williams reported as her squadron broke through the final defensive layer. "Landing craft are away. Resistance is minimal." The irony was not lost on anyone watching the assault. 50 years earlier, a single human had stood trial in the Council Chamber, condemned by aliens who thought his species too dangerous for civilized space. Now human soldiers were storming that same chamber, proving that the Council's fears had been completely justified. Chancellor Mordain and the surviving Council members were brought before Emperor Cross in the same chamber where humanity had been banished decades earlier. The ancient alien looked older and more fragile than Cross remembered from the historical recordings, his metallic skin dulled with age and defeat. "You have won," Mordain said simply, his voice carrying none of the arrogance that had characterized Council proclamations for millennia. "What are your terms for our surrender?" Cross looked at the assembled alien leaders, creatures whose species had ruled the galaxy since before humans had learned to make fire. They expected execution or enslavement, the traditional fate of defeated enemies in galactic warfare. Instead, the human emperor surprised them with an offer that no Council species would have made in victory. "The Galactic Council is dissolved," Cross announced, his words being broadcast to every world in known space. "In its place, we establish the Terran Galactic Empire. Any species that wishes to join us will be welcomed as equals, regardless of their past allegiances. Those who prefer independence will be allowed to govern themselves as long as they respect the rights of others." The former Council members stared at him in shock. They had expected vengeance for 50 years of exile and persecution. Instead, they were being offered positions in the new government as junior advisors, their experience and knowledge valued despite their former hostility. Dr. Linda Hayes, now serving as the Empire's chief cenocultural advisor, stepped forward to explain the new system to the bewildered aliens. Her years of studying different species and cultures had convinced her that the galaxy's problems came not from the inherent evil of any particular race, but from the Council's rigid hierarchy that treated some species as superior to others. "The Empire operates on merit and contribution rather than species or age," Hayes explained to the assembled delegates. "Every world contributes according to its abilities and receives protection and support according to its needs. There are no first-class or second-class citizens, only members of the galactic community working together for mutual prosperity." The transformation of galactic civilization began immediately. The oppressive tribute system that had drained the resources of weaker species for millennia was abolished. The rigid caste system that had kept entire races in permanent servitude was dismantled. For the first time in galactic history, a government existed that truly served all its citizens rather than just the most powerful. Within 5 years, the new system had proven its worth. Former Council worlds that had struggled under the old tribute system were now thriving as their resources were invested in infrastructure and development rather than being shipped off to support the ruling classes of more powerful species. The Skarn, once treated as expendable shock troops, now served as equals in the Imperial military alongside humans and dozens of other species, the aquatic Deepwater Collective, who had been forced to provide rare minerals to the Council for centuries without compensation, became key partners in the Empire's expansion into ocean worlds. The insectoid Terminus swarm, previously exploited for their manufacturing capabilities, now led the Empire's industrial development programs and shared in the profits of their own labor. Even former enemies found places in the new order. The Zephyrians, who had been among humanity's harshest critics, discovered that their natural diplomatic skills made them valuable ambassadors between species that had been enemies for thousands of years. The Vorthans, whose military had been crushed at Epsilon Eridani, became respected partners in developing new defensive technologies. Emperor Cross stood on the observation deck of the Imperial Palace, 5 years after the fall of Nexus Prime. watching as construction ships worked to complete the new orbital cities that would house the Empire's diverse population. Humans worked alongside aliens of dozens of different species, united by common purpose rather than divided by ancient prejudices. Ambassador Lisa Carter, now in her 90s but still sharp and determined, brought him the latest reports from the expansion fleets. The Empire continued to grow as more species requested membership, drawn by stories of the prosperity and equality that Federation citizenship provided. "The Andromeda expedition is ready to launch," Carter reported, her voice filled with the same excitement that had driven her diplomatic career for 7 decades. 60 colony ships carrying volunteers from 47 different species. They're calling themselves the Galactic Pioneers, united in their desire to explore new frontiers together. Cross smiled as he watched the massive ships preparing for the journey to another galaxy entirely. The humans who had once been condemned as too dangerous for civilized space were now leading a coalition of species toward adventures that previous generations could never have imagined.